rise of Muslim scholars that really protected a lot of that.
A lot of it.
Which is interesting because a lot of the threat on Timbuktu recently has been from Islamic extremists coming
Really?
in. Yeah, they had to go. There's a really great book called The Badass Librarians of Timbuktu, where they
Check that out.
Was it Al-Shabaab? Yeah, that's Al-Shabaab was that kind of, they're the ones that kidnapped the girls in Nigeria. They're the kind of ones where they were coming through and kind of basically destroying a lot of academic work. And so they had to get a lot of that stuff, and Timbuktu's not easy to get to. Even today, it's not easy to get to. I think the only way you can get to it is by river. I mean, you can get to it by air, but it's not easy to do. And
Right.
Sorry, I could go off. I'm a nerd.
No, you good. Because I think the other school was Salamanca. All that was Northern Africa. I think from like Spain, all the way down to like Northern Africa.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, I guess the Moors. Yeah. But anyway, that's a whole nother.
Sorry, we that's another day.
But okay, so you made a delineation between popular theory of CRT and then what CRT actually is.
Sure.
What is you brilliantly laid out what CRT is from a legal perspective.
Sure.
What is CRT from a cultural or pop cultural narrative?
I mean, what it's become is a dog whistle. Anytime somebody wants to have a conversation about race, especially race in modern society, people that aren't comfortable having those conversations will say, well, that's CRT. And you're teaching critical race theory. You're trying to say that now things aren't equal when things are clearly equal right now. And right. I mean, but you got to realize there are some people who actually think that. I mean, there are people who.
I just feel like you have to be like in total denial.
I don't think you do.
Really?
I'm not saying they're right. I'm saying we have a fundamental disconnect. It's like, so the way I describe it is when I talk to people about the Civil War, right? The causes of the Civil War. We talk about the lost cause or the sacred cause, and its relation to why the war happened, and it not being about slavery when we know it was.
Right.
And when those Southern historians, that's what I tell people, that when you have people who believe that, oftentimes people treat it as, well, these people are ignorant. We need to fill a vacuum in their minds with the right information.
Right.
What you don't realize is that there's information already in their minds. So when you try and push it in there, it's going to kick back. There's just, because humans are only capable of so much. And so trying to introduce those competing ideas can be a problem. Now, I'm not saying that it's not possible.
Right.
I'm just saying you're going about it wrong. We're not going about it the right way, and that you've got to fundamentally alter the way people's worldviews are.
Right.
Because they're growing up thinking. They grew up hearing. I mean, like, literally the Daughters of the Confederacy wrote school curriculums that they pushed into Southern schools that taught the lost cause theory. I mean, my Georgia history teacher was an old racist bigot who recently lost his job for writing racist, bigoted things in his newspaper column.
Let me ask you this. Okay, Zachary Ames.
Yes.
Born in the South.
Sure.
You just talked about, the culture that you grew up in, educationally.
Yep.
How did you get to where you are now? Like, how are you not a racist bigot? I mean, seriously, like, what? I mean,
I would say first, let me say subconsciously, some of that stuff still bubbles up because it's what you grew up in. So let me be very clear at first, like, I'm not some perfect individual. That there are probably times where, thankfully, it's fleeting. But I mean, like, you hear things, you see things, there are things that subconsciously, and again, it's that conditioning.
Right.
At the same time, I mean, look, I could tell, I read. My mom made us read. We read books, and when you read,
hi mom, salute to mom.
Salute to my mom. God rest her soul. My mom made us read. That was just it. Like, I had to read all the time. And when you read, you get into somebody else's life.
Wow.
You get in. I know people get up in arms about To Kill a Mockingbird these days with white savior complex and all that. But there's that quote from Atticus that says, you got to get her in somebody's shoes and walk around for a while.
Right.
I mean, reading does that. Reading has to do that, especially fiction. I tell people all the time, reading nonfiction is great and I enjoy it, but you gotta read fiction. You can't read Toni Morrison and walk away. And I'm using her as a popular example, but you can't read, her fiction. You can't read Beloved. You can't read Sula. You can't read The Bluest Eye. You can't read that stuff and not walk away fundamentally changed. And so when you read that stuff, you're going somewhere. You're going somewhere that you're not normally supposed to be in. But then it's also listening. It's
So is it fear or ego that keeps us separated?
both. I mean, the fear that you're going to lose to what that perceived ego. I don't think that. I mean, that kind of goes back to replacement theory. I don't think that.
I got you.
What you got? Oh, my bad.
Yeah.
It's. I don't think that they're just afraid of another culture, another group coming in. They're afraid of subconsciously
Of being eliminated?
not being eliminated, of just change, fundamental change.
I remember somebody told me equality feels like oppression when you're used to privilege.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm an 80s baby.
Okay.
Grew up in the 90s. My education was very much African centered.
Yeah.
Black nationalism,
Sure.
Black Panthers, Dr. John Henry Clark, different African centered scholars.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that the narrative that I was so I don't how do I say this?
However you want.
I mean, I was just pretty much told that the world hated us.
Yep.
And I think how do I say it? A lot of resentment towards white people
Sure.
was kind of,
Sure.
I remember being in Mississippi with my grandfather. My grandfather owned some land out there, R.I.P. to granddad. And I remember a white guy had came on the land.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say my grandfather turned into like a gangster, I used to be like, I may have been like 6 or 7, but I noticed his posture changed. He went and got his gun. And I just remember thinking like, dang, like where did that come from? And then when I actually learned more history, I'm like, well, shit, you're a black man in Mississippi.
I was gonna say it's Mississippi, so
right,
that's being from Alabama. Our one way to defend ourselves is at least we're not Mississippi.
Oh wow.
That was always our thing. I'm sure Mississippi has something about Louisiana or Arkansas, but
right.
That was Mississippi. You're gonna find that, but
Yeah.
but I don't. I mean, that's not surprising. Like
Right.
when you look at the history of the United States.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, literally the people that tried to bring peace were people that were gunned down and killed. I mean, whether you want to talk about Malcolm or Martin,
Yeah.
and again, that's just one of the few. We can talk about Medgar Evers. We can talk about plenty of guys
Yeah.
who really their goal was to bring peace.
Right.
They just wanted they just wanted to live a life in a country where like they could wake up and do normal things every day and enjoy opportunity.
Right.
Which shows that they recognized there was opportunity here.
Right. I mean, I remember somebody saying, it was one of my frat brothers, his name is Stan Verrett, he's on ESPN, he was saying, we hold true to the promise of America.
Yeah.
There are promises that were made.
Sure.
So we're just saying, we're not saying we want more than any other group of people.
Yeah.
Just, you said all men are created equal. We want that equity.
Yep.
Liberty and justice for all, and it's so hypocritical that even when these lofty ideals were written down, there were people that weren't even considered a full person.
Yep.
So it always kind of, I guess, befuddles me, like how.
I'll say, I mean, that's the challenge. I mean, I've been blessed. I mean, I've grown up, and most of my, some part of my growing up life and in a lot of my adult life, I've been in a lot of black spaces. So, the school I worked at for a long time, for 10, 11, 12 years, I was the only white guy there, except for our principal.
Wow.
It was me and a bunch of black women educators who I learned so much from all of them.
And that kind of answers my question from earlier.
Sure. I mean, it's I was around people that I learned from and mostly listened. Every now and then I'd ask a question.
Right.
Mostly I just shut up and listen. I just shut up and I remember when here recently the natural hair movement kind of started coming back.
Right.
And I had a friend who sent me this law that some Rockdale County lawmaker was trying to pass about outlawing hair discrimination. And he's like, this is a dumb law. This is stupid.
No, but it's valid.
And it was valid to me because I worked with women who were going through that. And also I'd taken Dr. Rouse, God rest her soul. She passed away, I think about a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
And I learned that stuff. And not only had I learned it in a book, I'd been around women who talked about discrimination based on hair and that kind of thing. So I was able to tell him, hey man, This is why, and that's a blessing for me. That's not that is maybe better than anybody else. God has put me there. I'm a big believer in God putting us in places in His sovereignty.
Right.
You know, and where I'm at now. You know, I'm at the school I'm at. It's 90% African American. You know, I do a lot of listening. Now, obviously, I do a lot of talking because I'm a teacher.
Right.
But I also do a lot of listening to the kids and kind of talking about where you're coming from, the hostility sometimes. Look, I deal with that when I come in. I walk in. I mean, I know parents walk in on open house.
Who is this? Santa Claus looking.
They walk in. They're like U.S. history. They walk in. They see me, and they're like, "Oh my God!" And I've had parents be bold enough to come up and ask me, "Are you gonna teach? Are you gonna teach about us?" Talking about
really.
And I'm always like, "Hey," I was like, "First, look around at my room."
Okay.
I've had I've had that comment before. Is just being in the room, the aesthetic. They're like, "There's black folks on your wall." Like, you know,
Right.
there's Frederick Douglass right here. One of my big projects we do is a Harlem Renaissance project where I have them
really?
create promo posters, like concert posters, but for Harlem Renaissance artists. And it's not just musicians. We do it for writers. We do it for you know, whether it's Lena Horne or Duke Ellington or Thelonious Monk or Marcus Garvey. Like, we do all of them. Like, you can pick whoever you want. And so I make sure that's there so that parents know. But I have to reassure those parents, like, hey, to the best of my ability, I'm gonna teach what's beyond this curriculum, because this curriculum it's bad in general. It's just not good. I would say yes, there are some racial elements to it that make it bad, but it's also just bad curriculum.
You what was it? I remember I came across you spoke of the white I guess the white savior complex. It kind of made me think of who wrote that? It was called A White Man's Burden. Who wrote that?
I'm trying to remember.
I can't remember, but I remember reading it and thinking it was satire. And no, they were like serious.
Yeah. But again, everybody, and I get.
Was it Rudyard Kipling?
It might have been. Yeah, it might have been Kipling.
Okay, yeah, I'm listening.
You know, even understanding why, you know, to a lot of white folks, why they still want to consider Atticus Finch a hero, because he was at least what they hoped their ancestors would have been, a person who stood up for others, a person who, in his simplest case, again, I'm simplifying the book, but a guy who did the right thing when everybody was doing the wrong thing. I mean, that's what they hope. The fact is that those people were probably, we know this, in those kind of situations, those people are few and far in between. Your grandfather, your grandmother was probably not Atticus Finch. And in fact, Atticus Finch was probably ran out of town before he ever practiced law in that town.
Or murdered.
It's like the guy right after there's a story. There's a guy who spoke to the Chamber of Commerce the day after the Birmingham bombings. He was a white guy speaking to the Chamber of Commerce, a bunch of business guys. You can go look it up. There's a speech he gave to that Chamber of Commerce or the Rotary Club, one of those business organizations, where he basically blamed. He said it's our fault that the Birmingham church bombing happened because we've tolerated what's been going on in Birmingham for so long. Not just bombings, but racist attitudes and it kind of talking about replacement theory when we talk about the Buffalo shooting and that guy. Like, when you tolerate these terrible ideas for so long, well, that's biblical. Like, long enough, if you let sin breed long enough, that breeds death, and that's what it bred. And so he said that he gave this big fiery speech, and we'd love to say that he became this leader in Birmingham where they ran him out of town. He ended up in Indiana.
Wow.
I mean, like, you know, even when people did do that kind of thing, they were run out of town.
I guess, dang, you got me thinking.
Sorry.
No, you good. I feel like ultimately we're just strangers. Like, I think everybody grows up in their box, you know, and everybody's otherized, or those N-words, those crackers, those, you know, so it's almost like we're in this little bubble, and there's just so much fear and false narrative that's perpetuated in our bubbles. And I'm reading this book right now called The Subtle Art of Not Giving a F.
Yeah, I know.
And I thought, he said something in the book I thought was very interesting. He said, it's not, what did he say? He said, ultimately, we do things not with evil intention, we just think everybody else is evil. So there's like this distortion. Like, I mean, no, I don't think anybody wakes up in the morning and says, I'm evil, I'm wrong. There may be some psychos that do that, But on average, I think people think that they do the things that they do.
People feel justified in what they're doing.
Yes, and there's like a moral high ground that they're coming from.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was talking about with the knowledge thing, right?
Yeah.
Is that we come to people like that thinking, well, you're just ignorant. If we make you smart, if we educate you,
Right.
The problem is that there's already an education. It's a bad education, but it's already there.
Yeah.
And so you're not necessarily uneducated or dumb. You're badly educated, or you're badly motivated.
Wow, I like that. Badly motivated.
Yeah. I mean, and what motivates us more than anything is self, right?
Right.
I mean, that's biblical, right?
Yeah.
That humans look out for one another. I mean, that's, I've always said, you know, when Jesus said, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, part of what Jesus was playing on there was our selfishness, right? And that we know we want the good things to come to us. We know we want to be treated like royalty. We want to be treated better. And so what he was saying was like, treat other people that way.
Right.
It wasn't just like this kind of cool, like treat others as you want to be treated. As if we're all just sitting around going, I just want to be treated equally. No, we want the most out of life,
Right,
even at the expense of others.
Definitely.
And we don't always care about who we're going to go over. And I think that's transcultural,
Definitely.
whatever we want to, transracial, whatever word we want to use.
Right.
Trans, all those things. You find those everywhere.
One thing, okay, Rudyard Kipling did write
White Man's Burden. Yep.
And I guess I didn't take this class with you, but it was a film class, and we had to talk about different narratives that were pushed in film, and then it spoke to just greater media.
Sure.
And it's like there are so many narratives being sold that aren't true.
Yeah.
You know, like, and I think like I remember I made my mom mad when I did this. My junior year of college, we had a white divinity scene on our over the
nativity.
over,
You got rid of it. No, you didn't.
yeah, I took it down, and my mom was like, "What are you doing?"